"What's the matter, sweetheart? Chip a nail in PT?" Brant Maddox's voice sliced through the thick redwater humidity like a sharp fragment, and Lieutenant Mara Kestrel didn't move an inch as 5 Marines tightened their circle around her like predators scenting weakness. Their laughter hit with the same venom that had already pushed 3 other female candidates out of this course. They noticed only the soft-looking hands inside her gloves, never realizing those same hands had clawed through Afghan soil while she dragged her bleeding spotter nearly 2 miles to an extraction point, even as her own femur was fractured in 3 spots. They saw a pretty face instead of the woman who'd flatlined for 43 seconds after throwing herself into the path of shrapnel meant for her team leader. Beneath her collar, the dragon and balance tattoo remained hidden, its coordinates marking a graveyard in Syria where she'd laid 8 men to rest after a mission the government still pretended never happened. Master Sergeant Brant Maddox stepped forward, all 6'3" of swagger and misplaced confidence, popping his knuckles like he was about to educate some spoiled princess on what real warriors go through. He had no clue he was standing 3 feet from the only operator to survive Hell Week twice, first as a SEAL, and later undercover as a foreign candidate just to prove a point about women in combat. Fog drifted across Redwater Base like a funeral shroud, heavy enough to blur sound, but not enough to hide the static of tension sparking between them on the obstacle course staging ground. Mara Kestrel, 28 years old and 5'6" of condensed lethality, held parade rest with the calm stillness of a weapon waiting to be fired. Her dark hair, pulled tight into a regulation-perfect bun that had somehow survived a 5-meter ocean swim, dripped salt water onto shoulders carrying far heavier burdens. She never looked like much at first glance. That was the mistake everyone made. The Marines around her flaunted strength and bulk and loud bravado, but Mara's power lived in the space between movements, the way she balanced perfectly across both feet, the controlled rhythm of her breathing despite adrenaline thick in the air, the tiny, deliberate shifts in her stance that kept every muscle primed to erupt without giving away the slightest hint of intent. Master Sergeant Brant Maddox stalked the edge of the training ground, his boots grinding gravel with a slow, intentional threat, while the 4 Marines behind him hovered like bad backup dancers trying to look intimidating. They were supposed to be at Redwater Base for advanced tactical instruction, but everyone knew their real mission had shifted the moment they noticed a woman's name on the instructor lineup. From the tower above, Colonel Alden Pierce watched the scene unfold, his lined face unreadable. After 53 years on this earth, he'd seen enough true operators to recognize one no matter the wrapping. He knew exactly who Mara Kestrel really was and what she had done in places the military pretended weren't on the map. What he couldn't figure out was why someone with her operational record had all but begged for this assignment, choosing to train new candidates instead of staying in the shadows where she belonged. And wherever you're watching from right now, lean in, because what happened next on this fog-choked training field would be retold in the special operations world for years. Major Tom's tales couldn't make up material this wild. If you think ignorance never collides with expertise, hit subscribe. The first sign came from her hands. While Maddox puffed up his chest and his guys chuckled behind him, Mara absent-mindedly traced the edge of her glove, her fingertips gliding over the raised scar running from palm to wrist. That scar belonged to a name, Lieutenant Jonah Reeves. The Marines surrounding her had no idea who Reeves was. They didn't know about Kandahar, or the life she'd lived before becoming Lieutenant Reeves's protege and eventually his equal. They were seconds away from learning a lesson no academy curriculum had ever covered. That scar beneath her glove had been built through 3 surgeries and 40 months of rehab, though the injury itself had taken only seconds. Kandahar Province, 2018. Operation Copper Shield. a mission so buried that even its failure was classified. Back then, she'd been Petty Officer First Class Mara Kestrel, attached to SEAL Team 4 as the first woman to push through Green Team selection. Not officially, of course. Publicly, she had been labeled Intel Support, but titles don't matter when you're creeping through Taliban valleys at night. What matters is whether you can haul your gear plus someone else's when things go bad. Her father, Master Chief Orion Kestrel, had shaped her for this life without ever intending to. A Navy corpsman who'd served beside Marine raiders, he raised her on stories of battlefield medicine and tactical grit. But it wasn't the stories that hardened her. It was hearing his nightmares through thin apartment walls, or finding him at 3 a.m. doing push-ups because sleep dragged ghosts he didn't want to face. She'd begun training at 12, not to copy him, but to understand him. By 15, she could strip an M4 blindfolded. By 18, she could run a marathon with 40 pounds on her back. But no training prepares you for the moment reality opens fire. The ambush hit her from 3 directions at once. Their convoy, 2 vehicles disguised as civilian transports, rolled over an IED at exactly 0.4. The blast flipped the lead truck where Jonah Reeves and 2 others sat. Mara's vehicle, 50 meters behind, instantly turned into a stationary target. In school, they talk about the fog of war, but they never mention the moment you accept you're already dead and everything becomes sharp and calm. Mara cut through the kill zone like water, her M4 barking in controlled pairs as she pushed toward the overturned truck. The Taliban fighters expected panic. Instead, they met precision. Cold, exact, unrelenting. She reached Reeves just as a 3rd RPG slammed into the wreckage, and she threw herself over him while shrapnel shredded the air like a blender. Her left hand, pressing hard against his chest wound, was pinned when a chunk of the vehicle's door dropped like a guillotine, nearly slicing her palm off. For 17 minutes she held pressure with a hand barely hanging on, talking Reeves through the shock while calling in their position. When the QRF finally rolled in, they found her still shielding him, their blood mixing in the Afghan dirt. Reeves survived 6 more hours, conscious for the last 2. His last words in that helicopter, soft, fading, meant only for her, became the thing she steered her life by. Make them better than us. That was the reason Mara Kestrel shifted into instruction, why she signed up for every qualification course available, from Navy SEAL programs to Army Ranger School to Air Force combat control pipelines, always unofficially, always as the observer who somehow outperformed half the roster. She turned herself into a scholar of warfare, collecting skills the way others collected medals. The Dragon and Balance tattoo, inked during her recovery trip to Thailand, carried the coordinates of Jonah Reeves's final mission. The dragon curling around scales meant to remind her that strength needed justice and power needed purpose. Yet, standing here now, surrounded by Marines who thought she was weak, Mara couldn't help wondering whether Reeves would approve of what she was about to do. Master Sergeant Brant Maddox had shown up at Redwater Base with a reputation trailing him like a storm cloud. 15 years in Force Recon, 2 Bronze Stars, and an ego that had rotted into toxicity after his 3rd deployment. He was the textbook case of a man who built his entire identity on brute strength, now forced to watch the military evolve past the narrow definition he worshipped. Every announcement about female integration felt, to him, like the world taking something from his personal altar. When he saw that Lieutenant Mara Kestrel would be the tactical instructor, he laughed loud enough for the barracks to echo, and then immediately began plotting. His attempts at undermining her started small. During the first briefing, Maddox stayed seated when she entered, forcing her to speak over his calculated disrespect. His squad, Sergeants Hale, Voss, Riker, and Corporal Dax Lynn, followed his lead, giving her tactical briefing all the attention of a group watching paint dry. Mara didn't flinch, calmly explaining the upcoming evolution. Transitions from urban combat to maritime operations, building clearing with tidal shifts, gear malfunctions caused by salt water, and the unique chaos of amphibious engagements. Maddox cut her off 15 minutes in. "Ma'am, with all due respect," he said, making it clear he meant none of it. "Maybe we should hear from someone who's actually seen combat." The room went dead quiet except for the muted snickers from his guys. Mara simply set down her marker and met his stare. She didn't mention the awards the government still pretended she didn't earn, didn't reference her hidden commendations, or Reeves's classified recommendation for the Navy Cross. She only said, "Noted, Master Sergeant. Evolution begins at 0500. That night, Maddox pulled together a so-called readiness check. Anonymous complaints magically appeared, questioning whether the training followed proper standards. Under that manufactured pressure, the base commander approved Maddox's request for an additional assessment, basically handing him a stage to challenge her authority. Over the next days, the psychological games escalated. Her equipment malfunctioned mysteriously. Radio frequencies overlapped accidentally, drowning her demonstrations in static. The Marines arrived late, left early, and performed just poorly enough to suggest she was a bad teacher rather than victims of deliberate sabotage. The breaking point arrived during a casualty care drill. Mara was demonstrating proper tourniquet application when Maddox walked over, snatched the training dummy from her hands, and said, "Like this," addressing his men as though she weren't standing there. "Takes upper body strength to crank the windlass. Not everyone's got that." Sergeant Hale shifted awkwardly. Voss and Riker exchanged looks, even they realizing Maddox had crossed a line. But Dax Lynn, eager to impress, snorted and added, "Maybe we should just lower the standards, make it fair." That word, fair, hung in the air like a provocation. Mara stood still for 3 seconds. Then, in a tone so calm it cut deeper than shouting, she said, "Master Sergeant, you're right about upper body strength. Tell me, what's the maximum effective range of an M4 carbine?" Maddox smirked. 550 for point targets, ma'am." She nodded. "And most urban engagements occur at what distance?" "Under 50 meters. So, strength matters less than speed, accuracy, and judgment during typical engagements." His jaw tightened. "That's not 400, she interrupted. "Full combat load. We'll settle the question of standards." That line echoed in Mara Kestrel's mind later that night as she sat alone in her quarters, a single lamp throwing long shadows across otherwise bare walls. Bare, except for one photo. Her Kandahar team. Every face blacked out for security except Jonah Reeves, whose family had declassified his image after he died. Her rebuilt left hand, the one held together with pins and grafts, shook slightly as she turned his challenge coin over in her fingers. The pain wasn't physical anymore. The nerve damage made half her palm numb, a secret she'd concealed through 3 separate medical evaluations. The tremor came from deeper, muscle memory from those 17 minutes with her hand pressed against Reeves's chest, feeling his heartbeat stutter through her fingers while she promised him they'd both make it home. Only half of that promise survived. The flashback blindsided her, triggered by the sharp antiseptic scent from the medical supplies she'd been organizing. Suddenly, she was back in that helicopter. Reeves's eyes locked on hers as he tried to speak past the blood choking his throat. Not about pain or fear, but about his 6-year-old daughter starting soccer. "Make sure she knows," he gasped. "Make sure she knows her dad wasn't just a warrior." The memory shattered when her phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Alden Pierce. formal review board requested. Maddox filed an official complaint about training standards. Mara set the challenge coin down and crossed to her gear locker. Beneath the standard issue equipment lay a folder she'd hoped never to need again. Her real service record, the one listing operations in countries the United States publicly denied entering, the one confirming the call sign, Ghostline, earned not from medical training but from extracting critical assets under impossible conditions with surgical accuracy. She touched the dragon and balance tattoo through her shirt, feeling the raised scar where the ink had been driven deep. Maddox thought this was about gender. He had no idea he was provoking someone forged in fires he couldn't imagine, someone who'd paid prices he'd never understand. But revealing that truth would blow the cover-off missions still active, expose the extent of female integration in elite units long before the Pentagon was ready, and betray what Reeves had asked of her, make the next generation better, not win battles of ego. She made her decision like she made every battlefield choice. Quickly, cleanly, without emotion. Tomorrow, she would give Maddox exactly what he demanded, a test of standards, but not the version he expected. Her fingertips found the familiar ridge of scar tissue. In combat, the most dangerous opponent isn't the strongest one. It's the one who's already died once and kept going. Maddox was about to learn that the hard way. The crucible began at 0400 sharp, in the kind of darkness that swallows sound and amplifies fear. Colonel Pierce had approved it as an advanced tactical evaluation, a definitive answer to Maddox's challenge. What he intended as a public humiliation had been reshaped by Mara into something far more punishing, a classic SEAL assessment engineered for maximum psychological pressure. The evolution opened in the pool. Full combat load, 60 pounds of gear, treading water while solving tactical problems. Maddox's grin lasted exactly 3 minutes, evaporating when Mara began barking grid coordinates they had to memorize and repeat while keeping afloat. By minute 10, when she added underwater weapon assembly, Hale was already edging toward panic. Mara hauled herself from the pool, water sheeting off her gear as if it weighed nothing on her, and moved straight into the next phase while the others were still struggling. Colonel Pierce watched from the deck, and he missed nothing. She could have let Maddox's team sink under the weight of their own arrogance, but instead, Mara Kestrel chose to show them what real efficiency looked like, demonstrating every technique in a way that proved precision would always beat brute strength. Phase 2 shifted to navigation. 5 checkpoints scattered across Redwater Base. Coordinates provided only once. No maps, no GPS, just compass bearings and pace count. But the real twist came at each checkpoint. A wounded mannequin requiring different TCCC procedures, from arterial bleeds to tension pneumothorax to traumatic amputations. The clock wasn't just ticking time, it was ticking simulated blood loss. Maddox's team barreled through the course like bulls, relying on strength and speed, but lacking control. They hit the first casualty station 40 seconds ahead of Mara, only to waste 3 full minutes fumbling through a junctional tourniquet. Their hands, strong enough to press 300 pounds, shaking as they searched for a femoral pressure point. Mara, meanwhile, moved like smoke through the course, every motion economical, exact. At the second station, while Maddox's men argued about prioritizing airway versus hemorrhage, she had already performed a needle decompression and advanced. Her scarred, rebuilt hands worked with the calm precision of someone who had done this in real firefights. Phase 3 changed everything. Live fire stress chute, standard SEAL qualification, moving and static targets at multiple distances, all while maintaining comms with a simulated TOC. But Mara added her own twist. Each shooter had to guide a blindfolded partner strictly through verbal instruction. Voss was blindfolded first, Maddox calling out adjustments. After 3 misses, Maddox snapped, grabbing Voss's rifle and breaking the evolution's #1 rule: verbal guidance only. When Mara stepped up, she chose Dax Lynn, the same corporal who had mocked her about lowering standards. Her voice sharpened into a scalpel, slicing clean through his assumptions. Target, 2 o'clock, 3 meters. Elevation up 1 notch, wind left to right, 5 knots, squeeze on my count. Lynn, guided by the woman he'd dismissed, hit 90%, but the real crucible arrived in Phase 4. A layered tactical problem with a surprise hidden inside. Halfway through, Colonel Pierce introduced a wild card, a real medical emergency simulation. Sergeant Hale, already exhausted, began showing genuine signs of severe dehydration and heat stress. This wasn't scripted, wasn't expected. Maddox froze, torn between following the scenario and addressing reality. His team looked to him and saw uncertainty. Mara didn't hesitate. She sprinted to Hale in 12 seconds, initiated actual treatment, and maintained tactical security simultaneously. Her hands worked with clinical speed. IV line placed, vitals checked, core temperature monitored. And the brilliance? She never stopped directing the mission. She turned Hale's real casualty into a live teaching moment for combat medicine under fire, assigning each Marine a role without them even realizing the shift. Voss on security, Riker on comms, Lynn assisting with treatment, and Maddox forced into documenting everything, writing down her methods as he watched the gap between them widen. By minute 40, something fundamental had changed. The Marines weren't resisting her anymore. They were struggling to keep pace. Their hostility had cracked open into respect, sharpened with a hint of awe. And as dawn spread over Redwater Base, staining the sky the color of dried blood, the final test began. The final evolution was a hostage rescue scenario inside the kill house, complicated by a maritime insertion and chemical weapons protocols. 5 operators, 1 team leader, 30 minutes to plan and execute. Brant Maddox had insisted his Marines would prove what real special operations standards looked like. Colonel Alden Pierce agreed on one condition. Mara Kestrel would oversee the run from the Tactical Operations Center. The insertion started clean. Maddox's team fast-roped from the helicopter with picture-perfect form, secured the perimeter, and initiated their breach. The first room went flawlessly, the second just as smooth, and Maddox's confidence surged, his radio commands crisp, sharp, almost triumphant. Then the scenario twisted. New intel crackled over comms. The hostage had been relocated. Possible explosive device. Conflicting reports on hostile positions. Maddox requested clarification. The talk stayed silent except for one voice, Lieutenant Mara Kestrel, asking him for his assessment. He answered by the book, laying out a cautious, manual-approved room-by-room clear. And then, cutting through the static, came a voice that absolutely should not have been on that channel. Captain Rowan Slade, SEAL Team 4 Operations Officer, calling all the way from Virginia. Ghostline. This is Blackwater Actual. I understand you have eyes on. The kill house froze. Every Marine stopped breathing. They didn't recognize the call sign Ghostline, but Blackwater Actual was legend. The architect behind the Syria operations no one dared mention. Mara's reply was instant and surgical. Blackwater Actual. Ghostline confirms 5 operators inside. Standard stack, conventional clear, in progress. Recommend immediate transition to dynamic entry. Northwest corner forms a fatal funnel. How copy? Solid copy, Ghostline. Your assessment matches our simulation runs. Then, Colonel Pierce, are you on net? Pierce replied calmly. Monitoring. Captain, Are you confirming Lieutenant Kestrel certification? Affirmative. For the record, Lieutenant Kestrel completed SEAL Team 4 selection in 2017, graduated first in class, but remained off the official roster for OPSEC. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, 1 Navy Cross pending review. Operational call sign Ghostline. Verified across 16 missions in 6 countries. She literally wrote the manual your Marines are trying to follow. Maddox's hand shook so badly the radio almost slipped. Captain Slate continued, voice icy and precise. Master Sergeant Maddox, you requested an instructor who met the highest standards. Right now, you're being evaluated by the only operator to survive Hell Week twice, who then completed Green Team selection while recovering from combat injuries. The woman observing you has been declared clinically dead twice, and has more confirmed ops than your entire team combined. Silence swallowed the channel until Dax Lynn, the same young corporal who joked about lowering standards, broke in quietly. Lieutenant Kestrel, Ghostline, what's your recommended entry? Her voice returned steady and patient, the same tone she'd used all week, even after everything they'd put her through. The southeast window gives you the height advantage. 2 operators through the glass, 3 through the doors at the same moment, 15-degree offset so no one crosses each other's line of fire. Flashbang only, after visual confirmation. Chemical agents in play make incendiaries a bad idea. Mara Kestrel delivered the instructions with calm precision. Brant Maddox finally found his voice. Why didn't you say anything? Why let us? Because, Master Sergeant, she cut in gently, my job isn't to prove anything to you. It's to make you better than you thought you could be. Reeves asked me to build warriors, not win arguments. The mention of Lieutenant Jonah Reeves, whose classified death in Kandahar still circulated through special operations as a whispered legend, snapped everything into focus. Every operator knew the tale of the unnamed SEAL who held a teammate's wounds closed for 17 minutes under fire. They just never knew that SEAL was the woman they'd spent a week mocking. Maddox slowly set down his weapon, removed his helmet, and did something no one expected. He keyed his mic. Ghostline, this is Recon 2-1, he said quietly, requesting permission to restart the evolution under your direct command. Mara answered, steady as ever. Permission granted, 2-1. And Maddox, you've got solid instincts. You just let your assumptions muddy them. We'll fix that. 3 weeks later, the graduation ceremony for the Advanced Tactical Instructor course unfolded under a bright Redwater sky. Master Sergeant Maddox stood at attention beside his team, their certificates signed by Colonel Alden Pierce and Captain Rowan Slate, who'd flown in specifically to witness it. But the real moment had happened the night before. Maddox had found Mara in the equipment bay, checking gear for the next training cycle, her scarred hand moving with practiced efficiency. He stood silently for nearly a minute before admitting, I've got a daughter, 14, wants to be a Marine, and I've been telling her the wrong things. Mara looked up, catching the raw honesty in his voice. We all carry failures, Master Sergeant. The question is what we do with them. Maddox reached into his pocket, pulled out his Personal Force Recon Challenge coin, and placed it on the table. For Reeves, he said, and for what you taught us without ever needing to say it. Now, at the ceremony, Corporal Dax Lynn stepped up to deliver the class speech, insisting on speaking despite being the junior Marine. He talked about standards, strength, the warrior ethos they'd all sworn to uphold. But then he said something that made Mara's rebuilt hand tighten instinctively. The strongest warrior I've ever trained under weighs 130 pounds and has hands that shake from nerve damage. She taught us that real strength isn't measured by what you can lift. It's measured by the fact that you still choose to serve after you've already given everything." Those were Dax Lynn's last words at the podium, and they lingered in the air long after the applause faded. When the ceremony ended, Colonel Alden Pierce found Mara Kestrel standing alone near the shoreline, staring at the waves rolling in against the Redwater coast. "Next class arrives Monday," he told her. 6 Marines. All requested you specifically after Maddox filed his report. Mara nodded, fingers drifting instinctively to the raised lines of her dragon and balance tattoo. "Word spreads, sir." "Indeed it does," Pierce said. "Captain Slate wants you back in Virginia, says Team 4 has an opening." Mara turned fully toward him. "With respect, sir, I've got a promise to keep. Reeves didn't ask me to be the best operator. He asked me to make them better than us." Pierce studied her for a long moment before smiling. "Master Chief Orion Kestrel would be proud. Your father, I mean." For the first time in a long while, she gave a genuine smile in return. "He knows, sir. I called him last night, told him about Maddox and his team, how far they came. He told me something I won't forget." "What was that, Lieutenant?" Pierce asked. "He said, the scars that matter most are the ones that help others learn how to heal." As the sun sank into the horizon, Lieutenant Mara Kestrel, call sign Ghostline, prepared herself for the next cycle. 6 more Marines who would arrive carrying their own assumptions and leave carrying understanding. 6 more warriors who would learn that strength appears in forms they never expected. That standards aren't about who you shut out, they're about who you raise up. The dragon and balance tattoo warmed faintly against her skin, its coordinates forever marking the place where she first learned the true cost of service. Tomorrow she would teach others what that cost could purchase, not just survival, but transformation. And the cycle would begin again, for Reeves, for every warrior ever underestimated, and for a future that demanded more from them than the past ever had.